And so the way that Midian does this is they send women to the Israelites to fornicate with them. And then through relationships with these women, through concubines, just prostitution, fornication, and other things, they cause them to sin against God, and then they bring in these false idols. Oh yes, you can sleep with me. You just have to a little pinch of incense over to this false god right here. And how many guys would take that deal? So these women were part of seducing the Israelite men in order to lead them into idolatry. So they're going to be punished as well.
Yeah, you see, he's trying to paint these women as whores that are paid off by the Midianite king to go in there and cause the Israelites to sin against God. But this is not communicated through the Bible. This is all inserted information. This is what is called eisegesis. That's where you're trying to interpret some kind of text, typically in the Bible or some other kind of holy scripture or something like that, but you're inserting your own ideas into the text. Ideas that are not there. That's exactly what Mike Winger is doing. What Yahweh focuses on in this is the fact that the Israelites mixing with the Midianites and getting all chummy with them was causing the Israelites to worship other gods. So they were worshiping these other gods, not so that they could fuck the Midianite women, but just through the act of mixing different people groups. And that was really the only thing that Yahweh had a problem with. And this makes a lot of sense if you look at other instances of God punishing the Israelites. It wasn't because they were going around fucking other people or anything like that. It was because they were worshiping other deities. He gets very jealous about that kind of shit. Nobody takes God's fuck toys.
What's the story, though? And there's other issues to cover here, but the question's about verse 18. What about these young girls that have not known a man by lying with him? What does that mean? Keep them alive for yourselves. For this, what happens is some skeptics just fill in the blank with their imagination. Keep them alive for yourself. Oh, so you could sleep with them all you want. And then they become sex slaves. That's the question that was asked. Sex slaves. Doesn't say that, does it? It doesn't say that, does it? The women could either be servants or they could be potential wives. In fact, they weren't there just for sexual usage, which is why they had to be women who had not known a man, because they couldn't be part of that whole sex system that was going on and the temptation that was going on there.
Well, I think that we need to define what we mean by sexual slavery, because it's very important to define the terms that we're using. In Mark Klompberg's commentary on the Roman statute, he says this: sexual slavery is a particular form of enslavement, which includes limitations of one's autonomy, freedom of movement, and power to decide matters relating to one's sexual activity. Thus, the crime also includes forced marriages, domestic servitude, or other forced labor that ultimately involves forced sexual activity. So it seems like any forced sexual activity that occurs because one party owns another party in one way or another is indeed sexual slavery. This also includes forced marriages and the forcing of young servant girls to bear your child. Now, circling back to Numbers 31, the senseless murder of an entire group of people while saving the young virgin girls to be forced into either marriage or servitude is definitely sexual slavery. If you recall, we've already established that servants were used for sexual activity. If you'll think back to Hagar of Sarah and Abraham, she was forced to be impregnated by Abraham. And then if you look to Jacob, the king patriarch of all the Israelites. Then if you look back to Jacob, the king shithead of all the Israelites, he too practiced sexual slavery by forcing not only Leah and Rachel to be married to him through purchasing them, but also impregnating and having sex with their servant girls. So basically, forcefully subjecting women into the Israelite system is sexual slavery.
So in order to fill in the blank without our imaginations, but with scripture, what we need to ask is, what does the Bible say about the rules for Israelites when it comes to female servants? And there are specific rules in scripture. And so some of the rules are, you can't just sleep around with these women. Another rule is, if you do take a woman who's a servant to be a wife, she has to legitimately be your wife. I do not make this up, okay? This has been the biblical teaching on this. In the Old Testament, you take a servant to be your wife, you have to really make her a wife. And if you decide to send her away, if you decide to divorce her, you have to send her out with basically the alimony of a wife, the payments that you would give to a wife as you send her out, and she will not go from being a servant to your wife to being a servant again. She will go free with extra money so she can live on her own. The rules that we have are elevating the rights of women in these situations. You don't have sex slaves in ancient Israel. It's when we use our imagination to fill in the blanks on these vague passages, or at least brief passages, that it looks that way to people.
No, Mike, don't act like this is somehow elevating their rights. That's such a fucking disgusting way to view this problem. If anything, they're removing the rights of these young girls. They killed the entire group of people except for the young virgin girls and then decided to steal them for themselves. They are plunder. They are spoils of war. So, Mike, don't sit there and act like these young girls had a choice about anything. They definitely didn't have a choice in whether or not their entire people group got wiped out, and they definitely didn't have a choice when they got stolen by the Israelites. How fucking thick are you? Also, if you'll notice in this little section of Mike's, did he say anything about consent concerning these girls? No, he didn't. I really don't care if the Israelite savage marries the girl or not. The point is that the girl didn't give her consent in any of this. It's like Mike needs a remedial class on what the fuck is consent. All right, Mike, I'll help you out a little bit here. Unless the woman, or rather girl in this situation, however disgusting that might be, gives her consent to be married or to become a servant or anything like that, then it's considered sexual slavery because of the absence of consent. Forced marriages, sexual slavery. Involuntary servitude, as it's concerning women, ends up being sexual slavery. Jacob, Abraham, Moses, all of those fucking shithead patriarchs in the Old Testament, all condoned and permitted and practiced sexual slavery. I'm totally baffled by the fact that he thinks that forcefully marrying a prepubescent girl that was just stolen from her entire people group who was wiped out is somehow a progressive action. And it's all because, oh, well, now she's a wife. She's afforded all the rights that a wife would be afforded. Okay. She was still forced into it, though. So I don't care what kind of right she has now as a wife. The fact that she didn't choose this is the problem. And there is no way to get around the fact that Israel in the Old Testament is built off the sexual enslavement of women. Hagar, Rachel, Leah, their servants, Esther, just about every single woman that you read about in the Old Testament is a victim of sexual slavery in the Bible. And do you know why? From a historical perspective, we would say, well, this was the norm at the time. Sexual slavery of women, however horrible that is, was seen as a normal practice. And that's because back then, humans were not progressive. They were not thinking about the equal rights of all people. They definitely didn't consider everybody to be equal. But we also don't prop these people up as the arbiters of the moral good, which is what Mike Winger is doing with God and the Old Testament Israelites. Acting like sexual slavery didn't exist in Israel is just ridiculous and obtuse.